Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham promises financial assistance for businesses hurt by roadworks here in the capital. More on the Prime Minister's ultimatum to strong-willed customs and immigration officers. And Prince Harry ends his official visit here in the Bahamas. All those stories and more coming up in the Bahamas tonight.
Covering the islands of the Bahamas, ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
Good evening and welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the National Report. I'm Keishla Adderley. Thanks for joining us. Topping the news tonight, it was the subject of a class action lawsuit. Scores of business persons blamed the government's plan to redirect a series of corridors for killing their businesses. But today, some good news for them. Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham provided a detailed account of the New Providence Infrastructure Improvement Project during this morning's session of the House of Assembly, announcing that those merchants who suffered losses during the series of road redirections, closures, and detours will receive financial assistance. Arjanair Noel has details.
And torturous.
That's how Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham described the New Providence Road Improvement Project. He says that it has been faced with a myriad of challenges from its inception, and the government is now seeking a third loan of $65 million from the IDB to meet the project's funding gap.
The projected total cost of the IDB-funded portion of this project is now estimated to be $206 million. To date, the IDB has provided some $129 million in two loans, leaving a funding gap of $77 million, of which $30 million is in respect of fuel escalation, $19 million in contingencies, $14 million of variations and modifications, $9 million due to delay in project completion, and $5 million in professional and engineering fees.
Originally, the project was estimated at $66 million to be funded by the government and the IDB. However, the nation's leader also had some good news for businesses adversely impacted by the roadworks. The government, he says, will conduct a survey to identify those businesses and give financial assistance.
Options that will be considered may include rebates of business license tax and real property tax. We will also explore the appropriateness of a grant program similar to the Jump Start program that was announced in the last budget. As with the Jump Start program, such an initiative could provide invaluable assistance to affected businesses and allow them to maintain operations and employment levels without incurring additional debt.
And for those concerned about the management of the roadworks project, an independent review of the government's administration will also take place.
The report will be made public so the appropriate lessons will be learnt from the experience and inform public policy in the future.
While Minister of Works Nico Grant reported earlier this year that the project will be completed by July, Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham noted that the completion date was set for the end of January. However, the government is negotiating an addendum to finalize a revised date. Janae Noel Ferguson, ZNS News.
Well, had the contractors, Interbeton, builder of the second Paradise Island Bridge proposal to undertake the Nassau Road Improvement Project, not been rejected by the government, Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham said the road improvement project would have been completed by now.
Had the proposal been accepted, the $7.7 million spent on Harrow Road, the $3.3 million spent on Blue Hill Road from the roundabout to Robinson Road, the $11 million spent on Myla Butler Highway extension from Fire Trail Road to Carmichael Road, the $2.8 million committed for the extension of Gladstone Road from JFK to West Bay Street, and the millions of dollars being spent on the roads from Thompson Boulevard to Blue Hill Road, and the connector road between Bethel Avenue and Yale Way would not have been spent or could not now or would not now be needed to be spent.
Mr. Ingraham further explained the project would have been completed by 2005 with substantial savings. He also outlined roadworks that are set to be completed soon.
I'm assured by the Ministry of Public Works and Transport and by the contractor that by the end of this month, March, in the year of our Lord 2012, that by the end of this month, the works will be completed to allow two-way traffic on the following roads. Market Street from Duke Street to Robinson Road. I might stop and say, Mr. Speaker, there is a great challenge with respect to the sewer line that goes as far as Lewis Street. And that sewer line has to be reinforced. And so there's a possibility that that portion may not make the 31st March deadline. But I'm assured by them that Market Street from Duke to Robinson Road will be drivable. Prince Charles Drive from Foxwell Road to Marathon Road will be drivable. And Beale Road South to Soldier Road will be drivable.
Also from the House of Assembly this morning, Public Accounts Committee Chairman Bain and Grantstown MP Dr. Bernard Nottage tabled the report of the review of the New Providence Road Improvement Project and related government spending. Following that, Deputy Speaker Kwesi Thompson attempted to table the minority report, which opposition members strongly protested, stating that he was not following procedure. This escalated into a shouting match across the floor. House Speaker Alvin Smith finally ruled Thompson acted within the law to table the report. This resulted in further opposition objection. The Speaker then adjourned the House to Thursday. Afterward, the opposition held a press conference at which time Dr. Nottage emphasized that the report highlights administrative and financial mismanagement of the road improvement project.
Problems with the competitive bidding process, problems with billing and payments, and chronic quality control issues, which in our view can lead to serious financial costs as we go along.
Now, the Bain and Grantstown MP described the roadworks as the largest civil construction project in Bahamian history, noting that the committee doubted if the government was following Inter-American Development Bank policies for contracts.
We are concerned that the chronic ongoing violations of the specific terms of international agreements which may have occurred in this project could endanger future investments and thus potentially thousands of Bahamian jobs.
The financial statements of the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas, audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers from 2002 through 2010, were tabled in the House of Assembly by Minister with responsibility for the corporation, Tommy Turnquest. The statement ending June 30th, 2010, noted the corporation received subsidies from the government totaling some $8.55 million to cover operational costs. It also noted the downsizing exercise of 2010, which reduced the staff from 246 to 166. According to the statement, the downsizing was expected to have a significant impact on the overall expenses and pension liability. The Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority, IRCA, has released its new political broadcast rules, replacing the interim code of January 2010. The general election period remains unchanged from Parliament's dissolution to the polls' closure. The code requires broadcasters to disclose the name, political affiliation, and the approved identification of any paid political broadcast or advertisement. Political broadcasts and advertisements are permitted up to midnight before polling day. IRCA allows broadcasters to reject and refuse to broadcast any material the licensee may deem non-compliant with IRCA standards, the licensee's own technical standards, or any written law. On election day, no one is allowed to discuss or analyze election or referendum issues, release voting numbers before the polls close, release any opinion polls, results, or any political advertisements. The code prohibits the defamation or slander of a political party or candidate. IRCA encourages broadcasters to seek legal indemnities from candidates and political parties against defamation, copyright, and similar legal risks. The previous interim code places restrictions on the length, number, and volume of broadcasts and advertisements. The new code does not. This code also establishes standards for broadcasters. There is still some backlash from that reported industrial action conducted by immigration officers at the Lynden Pinling International Airport on Saturday past. It's reportedly the result of an ongoing disagreement between the union representing the officers and the government. ZNS News was first to report Prime Minister Hubert Ingram's comments on the matter, where he indicated that during a time when the country should have been celebrated internationally, we were embarrassed. He ordered those officers to return to work on Sunday, which they did. Our Clint Watson has more on the Prime Minister's press conference.
Prime Minister Hubert Ingram says he refuses to be pressured by special interest groups who are not thinking about what's best for the country.
When the election is coming up, lots of people think now is the time to make my demands, now is the time to make my grab, now is the time to get it, because this is the time when they are their weakest moment, and this is the time they'll be most responsive to me. But the reality is, when we are doing business like this, it doesn't matter whether it's election time or not election time. I should do what I consider to be best for the Bahamas.
After meeting a week ago with the Prime Minister, the Bahamas Customs, Immigration and Allied Workers Union announced they were reverting to general orders, claiming Mr. Ingram said he was not following a previously signed industrial agreement, but general orders.
All civil servants are subject to the general orders of the Bahamas, all civil servants. That's reality. They have some contractual terms that take them outside some of the provisions of general orders, but every civil servant is subject to general orders.
Mr. Ingram suggests the actions are politically motivated since during that meeting, talks appeared amicable and most of the issues resolved.
The shift system is in effect. In fact, if many of them would check their terms and conditions of employment, they will find that since 1996, nearly all of them have been hired by the public service with a condition in their contract that say, you shall work on shift.
The Prime Minister says a question of overtime is behind the Bahamas and no amount of agitation by the union will change that.
The Bahamas is never going to go back to the days of paying millions and millions of dollars in overtime pay to customs and immigration officers. It was my predecessors in office who finally came to terms with what we had started quite some time ago when we were in office before, when they signed a contract with the union eliminating overtime. It was my government that implemented it. What we will pay overtime for is in respect of any public officer who is required to work in excess of the 40 hours per week, 5 days per week, 8-hour shift, and sometimes we give them time off in lieu of pay, depending on their grade and their status in the public service.
The government has also increased the starting salary for immigration trainees. Clint Watson, ZNS News.
Well, still to come in the Bahamas tonight, Prince Harry bids farewell to the Bahamas. We'll have more on his visit coming up.